I read something online a while ago where someone said that vintage denim jackets did not have the selvage because the selvage, the fabric edge, was reserved for jeans, and the jackets would be made from the areas in between them on the fabric, essentially the leftovers, and therefore there'd be no selvage left. I couldn't find a sort of reliable source for this. If anything, I found pretty much the exact opposite. Heedle is one of the largest online denim communities, said vintage jackets, or specifically vintage Levi's jackets, had the selvage, and that's something that you should look for in a true vintage jacket. But after having made my own, I can kind of see where that first thought was coming from, that a lot of space is left on the fabric if you use the edge exclusively for jeans. They're long and thin pieces, and with a 65-inch width fabric, you often have a lot left over. I can kind of see why that could be a way that maybe not Levi's, but somebody else had done it in the past, even if I couldn't find something to back it up. It makes sense. And that's something that I think about a lot. Just because something is done a certain way doesn't mean it has to be done that way, or that somebody else hasn't done something different already. When we talk about historical evidence, a lot of the time, it's just the most popular thing or the most popular way something was done. And that's what I want to talk about today. The pattern drafting involved in denim jackets, kind of how the shapes came to be the way they are today, the different types of denim jackets, and also I'm just going to rip apart the Wikipedia page because it is terrible. Starting off with the types, look, there's lots of places that break this down. Let's go real simple and quick with it. Type 1 and Type 2 have these pleats on the front. I'm wearing a Type 1 right now that I made myself. And then a Type 3 is, they say the slimmest, and I put quotes around it because the shape is the same. And I'm going to get into that in exactly a minute. But essentially, it just does not have the pleats on the front or the back, and it has these kind of triangular shapes on the chest. And that's not to say that the Type 3 is bad. It's certainly the most popular style of denim jacket today, and then Type 1s and Type 2s are almost reserved as when someone wants to release something new that gives that vintage look. Often they'll acid wash it or something, and to me that just, I don't know, I think there's a practical reason that we could have Type 1s and Type 2s living and being made today outside of looking vintage. Some people will argue about certain pockets differentiating Type 1s and Type 2s. I think it's a relatively open-ended thing. I actually tried to find out why they have these pleats in the front, and apparently they're done that way so that you can cut them open and provide extra material. To me, that doesn't really make a lot of sense. I don't know, it seems kind of weird because you're basically just allocating for a beer gut, because the chest is still held in, the belt at the bottom still holds things in. You're basically creating extra material at the stomach. Anyways, getting off topic. The Wikipedia page was somewhere that I visited when I was making this video because I was just yeah, maybe I'll find some interesting historical facts or whatever. But then I looked through this thing, and this is why. Remember when you were in school and your teachers told you oh, don't trust Wikipedia, you can't use it as a source. Everything in it is correct. So obviously I still fight all my old teachers on that. But there's something about the way that this thing is written that just feels so dumb or even condescending at times. Let's go into it. Let me show you what I'm talking about. It's an iconic element of American fashion, a staple of Western wear. The denim jacket has also enjoyed a more general appeal. Sure, yeah, that's fine. That all makes sense. But then the Type 3 denim jacket, introduced by Levi Strauss & Co. in 1962, has been described as the denim jacket to rule them all. And in the darkness, bind the pleats? No, that's terrible. Cut that out. No, keep it. That was awesome. Also known as the trucker jacket, design elements of the Type 3 include a tapered style welt-hand pockets and bar tacks which hold down the chest pocket and sleeve openings. I mean, those are all fine details and all, but I would say the differentiation more of the Type 3 is that it doesn't have pleats as the Type 1 and Type 2 have, rather than a tapered style. And I think that's kind of my issue with a lot of these things is every company is going to do the Type 3 a little differently, and that's okay. So I laid my Type 3 over my Type 1, and it's not a perfect example because I had my Type 3 taken in, so if anything, this should be more extreme than what we actually see. But what we can see here is that both of them are squares. The claim that the Type 3 is more tapered is one that kind of bothers me because it's made by so many different companies that each one will do something a little bit different, and a lot of the ones that I've seen just aren't tapered. They might be tighter squares, but they're still a relatively boxy construction that it is kind of what makes a denim jacket, a denim jacket. And just to illustrate, the way that I made my front piece, the chest piece, was actually just by making the piece without the pleats. And when I want to add the pleats, I'm adding rectangles to a rectangle. So it's not a complicated addition, and I can choose the number of pleats I want to add that way. But if I wanted to make this into a type 3, all I would have to do is just take my template and cut a triangle out of it. But back to ripping on the Wikipedia page. It talks about a 2017 Google collaborated jacket, like a tech-infused one. I think that's all fine. But then this one here is so weird. It's just like, in addition to Levi Strauss & Co., other designers of the denim jacket have included Wrangler, Calvin Klein, Tom Ford, Gucci, and Dior, among others. And it's like, okay, like everyone makes a denim jacket. It's so ubiquitous these days. You want to go to H&M or the Gap, they'll have them too. Banana Republic's gonna have one. Like, you can list off any company you can think of, and if they don't have one right now, they've made one in the past. I don't see the point of listing these designers, and you're putting Wrangler side by side with Tom Ford as if they're both doing the same thing, which just seems weird to me. And like, nothing against Tom Ford or anybody else here, but like, there doesn't seem to be anything more typical of a cultural icon, something like the denim jacket, as taking a working class symbol of rebellion and culture and making it cost $2,000 and slapping a designer name on it, you know? Like, that's just life, I suppose. And cultural impact, according to GQ, there are a few things more iconic, more innately American than a denim jacket. Sure, that's fine. Jean jackets have also been popular with women. Like, okay, sure. Like, I don't mean that like in a bad way. I mean, like, yes, of course, anything can be. It's such a ubiquitous piece. You don't need to, it feels like weird that they would have to say like, oh, women wear it too. It's like, okay, cool. Like, of course they do. Like, of course they can. They should. It's what? In 2017, GQ opined that Kanye West seemed to own an alarming number of jean jackets, remarking that he doesn't seem to go a few days without wearing one. And like, sure? Is that relevant? Is this necessary? According to Levi Strauss & Co., the jean jacket has traditionally appealed to nonconformists as a knock to the suits. Its informal yet edgy heritage make it the ideal item to stick it to the man. And yes, you're describing a cultural icon and a symbol of rebellion, and I think there's, if anything, I want more of this, you know, maybe not a quote from Levi Strauss, but just like all the different parts of history that this thing has been a symbol of. I love how they have a section for the Canadian tuxedo. And look, everything in here is fine, it's accurate, it's Wikipedia, and I think that's kind of, if anything, a lesson on why you shouldn't take everything at its word, because they can highlight something that's not necessarily untrue, but isn't strictly important to like the actual piece they're highlighting. I really hope that one of the things that does not go down in history for denim jackets is that Kanye West owned too many of them. Jesus Christ. But anyways, what I want to do is talk about my denim jackets and kind of the pattern drafting and everything behind it, how I came to the style that I wanted to do. And first I want to talk about this one. I never made a video about this jacket. It did appear in one of my other videos, but like not really as a featured piece. But this one here was, you know, one of the first things I did. I think if I recall correctly, this was like the second thing I ever made. And basically I just took an existing type 1 jacket and copied the pattern as closely as I could, minimal modifications. But it was in the styling that I kind of did things a little bit differently. I didn't have a double needle sewing machine, so I knew that I was going to do a single thread around most edges. I hadn't figured out like a lot of the techniques that I would ultimately end up relying on a lot, or, you know, settled into the way that I really wanted to make and design things. Well, there were like a couple things that I got right in this jacket that I really liked. So like holding down the pleats, I didn't want that box because, again, like it didn't make sense to me to have the box. I didn't have a chain stitch machine at the time, so I held it down with these bar tacks, which I kind of like. I think it's a little bit more minimalistic, and because it's yellow with blue stitching, kind of the opposite of a traditional denim jacket, I wanted it to be maybe not as loud with the stitching. And that was kind of the whole thing behind this, was like, jeans are blue with yellow stitching, and I was like, well, what if I do a yellow jacket with blue stitching? It's like, oh, I'd do the opposite. Isn't that so cool? It is cool. But I knew I wanted a type 1. And then for the pocket, I kind of settled on the same style that I would end up doing for this one, which is a pocket kind of centered in the middle of the body. The type 1 that I purchased, I bought it because it had that style of pocket, and I looked at it and I was like, oh, that's really cool. I like that a lot. And then for the back of the jacket, I do have a cinch with pleats at the top. I didn't want like a kind of traditional looking belt that we see on the back of jackets where it's like often held with a rivet in the center and then just like they're just perfectly square rectangles. I just took inspiration more from like the kind of like side adjusters or back cinches that you see on like traditional dress trousers, because I thought those looked so much cooler. I was like, I want, like, you have a little pointy pocket, why not have like a pointy side adjuster or back adjuster, you know? It's like, it looks cooler. You know, I think you could make a more embellished design like that on the back of a denim jacket. To me, that seems kind of fitting with the kind of Western heritage, you know? The sleeves I did in 2 parts. I got it wrong. I was supposed to put the cuff opening here on this seam, but I put it here instead, which was a mistake. And just small things like that, you know? Like, I didn't realize that the collar didn't really go to the end. Like, even though I was looking at a jacket that did not do that, I still was just like, oh, I need to make the collar like go all the way around the edge of the jacket. And it's fine, you know, if I button it up to the top, the collar overlaps, and that looks okay. It's a little bit weird, I guess, but like not the end of the world. And then the buttonholes, like I did them by hand because I still maintain that whole idea of like machine, like home sewing machine buttonholes, the ones that are just like zigzags back and forth with bar tacks at each ends. I still don't like those. I think they can look okay on shirts, but I hate them on pretty much everything else. So for the jacket here, doing them by hand was less of a wanting to do it by hand, but more of a not wanting to do it by machine, if that makes sense, because I didn't have like the proper chain stitch buttonholer, like the really expensive single-use machine that obviously someone in my situation would not have. But overall, I mean, like, look, it was my second piece. I'm pretty happy with it, but I took a lot of the things that I didn't like about this, and in the jacket that I made here, or that I'm going to be making in the next couple of videos, I think I really kind of like honed in to the kind of style of jacket that I wanted to make originally, and figured out a lot of the things that were at first for me just kind of guesswork. So this here is all the denim jacket pieces that I've made myself, and I've dialed them in over a couple different iterations, starting with the yellow denim jacket, of course, like a couple test pieces before that, but then here I'm going to be making a black canvas jacket. And starting from the top, we have like the shoulder pieces here. So there's the front shoulder piece, there's the back shoulders, technically they're called the yoke. There's the back piece. It's folded in the middle so that I can kind of adjust like how wide I want it to be, but it's made this way without pleats, and if I want to add pleats in, then I just kind of like fold across the middle to make it a little bit wider. The sleeve probably had the most adjustment to it over the different iterations of it. This one here is articulated, but like very mildly so. This here is the front piece. I can't really see it very well, but I have some notes on it for how much to add for the placket, or like how many pleats that I want to do. A couple different pocket styles and pocket flaps. There is the collar. It's a point collar. That's why it kind of sticks out a little bit. Perfectly straight collar would just be like a square basically. But in the middle there, that's kind of where it gets folded over. Got the cuff right there, and then of course I have the belt. But the point of showing all of this off is that I want to kind of explain this process, because when people talk about making patterns for themselves, a lot of people don't really think about what that entails. And all of these pieces here, they're meant to fit together, you know, they're one piece. And if we were to talk about like making this in like a factory setting, you know, like doing proper production, we'd have to make one of these for every single size. But that's the thing with pattern drafting, is it's kind of open-ended. In my opinion, there isn't really a right way to pattern draft, but of course there are wrong ways to do it. You can make mistakes and you can do things incorrectly, or you can make an ill-fitting garment, but as long as you're accomplishing the kind of goal, the purpose, you want something to look or fit a certain way, and you accomplish that in your pattern drafting, then to me you're doing the job right. So I realized I kind of forgot to say, this is kind of a part 1 of 3 in a way. See, I want to kind of break it up into parts so that you can watch whatever part kind of appeals most to you. So the next part, which will be just me painting the denim jacket, kind of talking about the manga that the painting is based on. And then for part 3, I'll be actually like going over the making of the jacket. And then you can check that part out as well. That'll be coming out each week. Anyways, hopefully you liked the video, and I'll see you in the next one.